Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez presented to the National Assembly on Thursday the bill for the financial budget 2026. The International Observation Mission of the American Association of Jurists presented a preliminary report on its work in the general elections in Honduras. And the government of Palestine demanded that the Israeli regime reopen the borders of the Gaza Strip and allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez presented to the National Assembly on Thursday the bill for the financial budget 2026. During her presentation, Rodriguez stressed that the document was made amid a special context characterized by an unprecedented siege and threat against the Bolivarian nation by the United States government. The Vice President affirmed that presently Venezuela is defending an unquestionable truth that was born during the independence wars and which was engraved in the proclamation issued by Liberator Simón Bolívar at the Angostura Congress in 1818. Rodriguez emphasized that Venezuela is telling the world today that it has reinvented itself, that it will not surrender to any power, and that it is totally an independent nation.
We haven't hesitated in sustaining the truth of Venezuela and reaffirming our truth. Everything else is a group of lies to be able to justify an intervention, and as it was well denounced by the president facing the countries of the OPEP and the OPEP Plus, it is a lie, a group of lies to take the resources, the energy resources of Venezuela.
And in another part of her presentation, Rodriguez reiterated that the nation's constitution of 1999 established that state-owned oil giant PDVSA could not be privatized or sold, and that generated the United States' biggest concern and conspiracies against Venezuela to take over its oil resources.
The Constitution of the 1999, where it was clearly established that PDVSA is a Venezuelans and it cannot be privatized, it cannot be sold, and that caused in our historical enemy, the United States, well, the biggest concerns and the biggest conspiracies of knowing that they were losing the control on the petroleum reserves of Venezuela.
Rodriguez also affirmed that the results of the oil production in 2025 is a clear evidence that the nation's oil sector is recovering, and that is thanks to the efforts of the Venezuelan people.
Today we can show that we have been in a process of recovery of the petroleum production with our own efforts, but looking always towards the future with a goal that was set by the president for the end of this year of reaching the 1,200,000 cans as he has announced. So this is the path that Venezuela is on, under siege, threatened. It is the way of economical recovery.
And the United Nations General Assembly held an informal meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day Against Unilateral Coercive Measures. The date is being commemorated for the first time today, December 4th, and was established as part of the efforts to raise awareness of the negative impact of unilateral coercive measures that violate international law and the Charter of the United Nations. The initiative for this commemoration was led and promoted by Venezuela, a country that has been the focus of constant threats and interference from the United States government. During the meeting, United Nations representatives emphasized the importance of promoting dialogue, mutual respect, and multilateralism as the cornerstones of international relations and diplomacy. And in this context, the permanent representative of Venezuela to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, emphasized the challenges that the unilateral measures adopted against developing countries represent.
And food, these illegal measures paralyze the productive potential of the countries affected. cut supply chains and choke investment. So they really are the most significant impediment to national development plans and for the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. What's more, so-called humanitarian exemptions are no more than just cruel illusions. In practice, they are ineffective and largely fictitious.
In this scenario, the representative of Mexico reaffirmed that unilateral measures limit the establishment of cooperative relations and undermine peace.
Mexico reaffirms that embargoes, blockades and unilateral sanctions and economic pressure do not build peace, nor do they generate prosperity, and nor do they promote cooperation. No state should see their growth hampered by decisions adopted outside of the multilateral framework.
And for his part, the Cuban permanent representative to the United Nations referred to the unjust unilateral imposition of the U.S. blockade against Cuba and supported the appointment of a special advisor on unilateral coercive measures.
No country, however powerful they may be, has the authority to punish the rest of the world. And this is why we firmly support the appointment of a special advisor on unilateral coercive measures. We support the victims of these cruel and inhumane policies, and we call for their immediate, total and unconditional lifting to fully comply with our promise here of not leaving anybody behind.
In this context, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez highlighted the importance of the commemoration of his social media. The top diplomat stressed the International Day Against Unilateral Coercive Measures is part of the efforts to raise global awareness about the negative impact of such actions, which are contrary to international law and the United Nations Charter. Finally, Rodriguez expressed, "We denounce the damage caused daily to the Cuban people by the U.S. government's blockade and its economic war, and express our solidarity with the nations of the world that are also suffering the impact of these illegal and arbitrary measures." And in this same topic, the United Nations warned about the growing pressure from the United States on Venezuela's airspace. In a statement, United Nations experts express, "International law is clear. States have complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above their territory. Any measures that seek to regulate, restrict, or close another state's airspace are in blatant violation of the Chicago Convention." The document emphasized that actions affecting another country's airspace may amount to a breach of sovereignty and could constitute an illegal threat of use of force under international law. In addition, the United Nations stated that unilateral measures that interfere with the state's territorial domain, including its airspace, risk fully undermining the stability of the region and are seriously undermining Venezuela's economy. Despite the president's statements, the United States has no legal authority to close another state's airspace. The document also concludes that the long history of external interventions in Latin America must not be repeated. Respect for sovereignty, non-intervention, and the peaceful settlement of disputes are essential to preserving international stability and preventing further deterioration of the situation. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Venezuela, the head of state, Nicolás Maduro, emphasized that the Venezuelan people would resort to armed struggle solely for the purpose of defending the peace and sovereignty of the country in the face of threats from the United States. During the transmission of his program Maduro Live de Repente, the president endorsed the words of Venezuela's permanent ambassador to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, which seek to restore international law, put an end to unilateral coercive measures imposed on free peoples, and ensure that peace prevails capitals in the world. On the other hand, the head of state approved the request submitted by the National Institute of Civil Aeronautics to keep the vital return to the homeland government plan in place, which guarantees the continuity of repatriation operations and family reunification in the country. And in Venezuela, communal organizations in the parish of San Agustin began the tradition of Venezuelan Christmas celebrations in a context of family gatherings. Locals enjoyed recreational activities organized by the communal circuits in the area. The activities are part of the Happy Christmas plan promoted by the Venezuelan government during this season. Year after year, the communal event reiterates the position of peace and resilience sustained by the Venezuelan people amid growing tensions due to the military threat exercised by the United States over the South American country. And in Cuba, the main movie theaters in Havana will host the International Festival of New Latin American Cinema from Thursday 4th until the 14th of December. The 46th festival will feature a selection of 222 works from 42 countries, including Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia. This year, Mexico will be the guest of honor and will receive the Coral Honor Award for the 80th anniversary of the Mexican studio Churubusco. A section dedicated to the cinema of the BRICS countries, an alliance that Cuba recently joined, is also expected to be presented. Announcing Cuba, the island has reconnected the western part of the country to the power grid, but outages continue in numerous areas of the island due to a shortage of generation. According to the latest report from the nation's electric union, 8 thermoelectric power plants are currently out of service due to breakdowns or maintenance work, while the fuel shortage is affecting 80 distributed generation plants. The director of electricity of the Ministry of Energy and Mines said Thursday that the situation in the country is critical due to the lack of fuel for the operation of power plants. On the other hand, the island's thermoelectric power plants, which have been in operation for more than 20 years, run on outdated technology as a result of the economic blockade imposed by the United States more than 6 decades ago. In other topics, the International Observation Mission of the American Association of Jurists presented a preliminary report on its work in the general elections in Honduras. The report highlighted the extreme seriousness of the external interference in the Honduran electoral process, particularly the statements made by the President of the United States and the President of Argentina, which have placed the democratic legitimacy of the process in crisis and constitute a flagrant violation of the Honduran people's right to self-determination. Likewise, the mission expressed its deep concern regarding the leaks that occurred within the National Electoral Council, which were detailed in the report and could distort the legitimacy of the electoral process. Furthermore, according to Honduran electoral law, the CNE has 30 days after election day to issue a ruling with the official declaration of the winner of the presidential elections, a deadline that expires on December 30th. Now we go to Ecuador. The contentious electoral court of the country initiated a political persecution against the former presidential candidate for the Citizen Revolution movement, Luisa González. The electoral authority alleged that Luisa González committed an alleged breach in the submission of campaign accounts for the 2023 early elections. In this regard, several analysts described the action as a plot by the national government to weaken the opposition parties. Legislators from the Citizen Revolution movement party asserted that the National Electoral Council has become an executive arm for persecuting opponents. And also in the United States, Republicans in the Indiana House of Representatives unveiled a new and controversial map for redistributing congressional districts, increasing the current political tension. Republicans hold 7 of the 9 seats in the Indiana House of Representatives. In this scenario, Donald Trump and Republicans leaders at the national level have urged local lawmakers to pursue a full Republican map before the 2026 elections. The redistribution map seeks to eliminate the 2 districts currently controlled by Democrats. Despite the coercion, Indiana Senate leaders only agreed to meet next Monday, December 15th. However, it is still uncertain whether the pressure will be enough to secure the necessary votes to pass the plan. And now we have a second topic coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final show break, we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. In Palestine, an Israeli bombing leaves 6 dead and dozens injured in a camp for displaced persons in Khan Yunis. The bombing, which occurred near the Kuwaiti field hospital, adds to the airstrikes, bombings and shootings carried out by the Israeli regime amidst the humanitarian truce. In this regard, the Palestinian authorities denounced Israel's systematic violation of the peace agreement. Meanwhile, civil defense personnel arrived at the scene to carry out rescue operations and transport the victims. And the government of Palestine demanded that the Israeli regime reopen the borders of the Gaza Strip and allow the entry of humanitarian aid. The Palestinian executive emphasized that the amounts of humanitarian aid entering the Palestinian enclave are insufficient to meet the needs of the population living in the territory. Furthermore, it highlighted that in recent weeks, at least 287 trucks have entered. However, the Gaza Strip needs at least 1,008 vehicles every 24 hours. In light of this, the Palestinian government urges the international community and the United Nations to take the necessary measures to pressure Israel to compel it to reopen the border crossings and allow the entry of humanitarian aid in a safe and regular manner. And on Thursday, Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes on several villages in southern Lebanon, just a day after holding the first direct talks in decades between Israeli and Lebanese civilian leaders. The attacks targeted residential buildings across the towns of Marona, Haba, Al-Majadel and Brashid, damaging civilian infrastructure and triggering fires. In addition, an Israeli drone reportedly dropped a stun grenade on the Nakrura shoreline earlier in the day. Adding to the Lebanese Health Ministry, at least 335 people have been killed and 973 injured by the Zionist military since a ceasefire took effect in November of 2024. Under the agreement, Tel Aviv was supposed to withdraw from southern Lebanon in January, but instead only partially pulled out and continues to maintain a military presence at 5 border outposts. And in the south of Asia, heavy rain weather forecasts set off alarms in Indonesia and Sri Lanka are still dealing with the aftermath of recent floods and landslides. Let's recall that last week, two separate weather systems hit both nations as well as parts of southern Thailand and northern Malaysia, leaving more than 1,500 people dead. In Indonesia alone, the death toll has reached 836, while uncertainty remains for the more than 500 still missing. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, at least 479 died and hundreds remain missing. In this context, weather agencies in both nations have warned that regions would see moderate to heavy rain between Thursday and Friday, with the downpour starting overnight and with less intensity than last week. And in other news, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin with the aim of strengthening bilateral cooperation ties. During the visit, President Putin described India as a strategic and reliable partner for Russia in the field of defense. In his statements to an Indian media outlet, Putin emphasized that bilateral cooperation in the energy sector is not affected by the political situation. Also, President Putin stated that Russia and India have many interesting and future-oriented areas of cooperation, including artificial intelligence. Putin's visit will last until Friday, December 5th, for the 23rd India-Russia summit. And let's highlight, India and Russia share similar views on the future of the world. The relations are not only historical, but also well-developed and multifaceted, representing a privileged strategic partnership in which they cooperate in sensitive areas such as the exchange of technologies. India has declared that it will stand by its decision to continue importing Russian crude oil in the face of pressures from the United States. New Delhi also points out that there is no substitute for Russia as the world's second largest oil producer, and emphasized that Russian oil supplies account for almost 10% of the world's production. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. We also invite you to join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.